There we go. I just got a banner said it's saying this is that it's being live streamed.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's assume it's going to work. If you have the live stream working, yeah. If you have the live stream working, you're going to have to make sure that you have it muted. Otherwise, it'll be sound. It'll be
Like
repeating itself.
like a reverb or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not watching it. I'm just paying attention here.
All right.
I'll
Cool.
make sure I don't cuss or anything.
Well, let's get started here. Welcome everybody to the Old Grad Podcast. It's been a while since I've done one of these, so forgive me for a little bit of the glitches of getting it started. I'm your host, Jamie Schleck, company F1, class of 1991, and I am joined tonight by our esteemed classmate Lance Ashworth. Go tell the Spartans A2, right?
Go tell them.
And then Vince Lindemeyer. Vince, were you B4? What company were you? No,
I was B2 with the
B,
whole B2 Mafia guys.
B2.
Club
Yeah, that's
B2,
right.
yeah.
Club B2. Can't be too mellow.
hmm It shows 6 people waiting in your YouTube channel, but maybe it'll be delayed.
6 people waiting. Yeah, I'm showing it live. If they're waiting and they're not getting in there, I apologize. It seems to be live on one page here.
Okay.
Yeah. One of these days I'm going to get this thing right. There might be yet another live link. I don't know. It's supposed to just automatically go live here, but it doesn't seem to have done that, does it?
Now you have 11 awaiting. You're popular, Lance. There's 11.
Damn. I have 3 watching right now on this other stream.
Oh,
You know
no.
what? Could it have been those successive links that we tried and then I deleted?
I tried to delete those links, so I'm looking at the one that's actually live. So let me just
Okay.
once again, I'm going to be creating a bunch of dead air here. Let's see. Top chat. Yeah, I'm live on a different link than what I sent out. God darn it. What the hell?
And some people found it, huh?
I guess, yeah.
Well, if they wanted to search, what would they search?
Maybe just search my name, but here I'm gonna send you guys the live link. This is live. So now there's a 5th link. All right, that one's definitely live right now. Sorry for the confusion, everybody.
Okay. We just blast this out. See if there's an uptick in people joining when I send this.
Mhm.
Okay, now I'm definitely putting down my phone. Gonna roll with it.
Were you able to update the WhatsApp group there, Jamie?
I'm gonna do that too. Yeah. 6 concurrent views. Brad Woods is on, Alex Rogers is on, Sal Herrera. So, okay, I guess it's live. This link is live. I guess it's working. I apologize. I'm gonna get this shit down. Yeah, there's only a few ways to do it to get the repetitions, and unfortunately, I gotta like pressure test it a little bit. So I
No
apologize.
worries. No
Yeah.
worries.
Let me see if I get the WhatsApp.
I feel like I should tell a dad joke while we're waiting.
Tell a dad joke. Yeah, what's a good
Tell
dad
it,
joke?
tell
That's what
it.
we're all about.
Yeah, it's my go-to. Vince, did you hear about the um, scarecrow who won the award?
No, I didn't, Lance.
Yeah, he was outstanding in his field. G-rated.
That's a
We've
good
got
one.
11 watching. Please chime in on the chat so we know who you are, right, Jamie?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I'm able to monitor the chat live here too. I saw Brad Woods, Bill Ponick,
Panikvar, yeah, he's a high school classmate of mine. Great
okay,
guy.
and Alex Rogers. All right, so we're live once again. Let's start all over again. Welcome everybody to the Old Grad Podcast. I'm your host Jamie Schleck. We're joined tonight by our esteemed classmate from Company A2, Lance Ashworth. Lance, welcome to the Old Grad Podcast.
Thank you.
And I'm joined by my co-host for tonight, Vince Lindemeyer. Vince was the one who suggested this guest. So Vince, company B2, can't be too mellow. Vince, let's start with you. Where are you right now? Give me the here and now. What's going on? And how did you come to suggest that Lance should be a guest for the Old Grad Podcast?
Sure. I'm in South Florida. It's called Deerfield Beach. Cynthia and I moved down. Cynthia Ramirez, my wife of 30 years, September 20th of this year. Um, I3 Polar Bear, class of 90. She just did the 90 Camino hike with a bunch of West Point women, over 22 of them, and did 100 kilometers on the Camino. We've lived down in South Florida for 4 years now. I've been a nonprofit advisor for 8 years, and Lance and I connected over a year ago. We started a nonprofit leader group, and it transitioned to Conscious Impact Leader, which is a mastermind community, and we help nonprofit leaders and entrepreneurs towards higher consciousness and higher economics. And Lance stuck with me because I told him to ask for more money, and he did, and it worked. And so now we're a nonprofit marriage made in heaven, I guess. Um, the reason I nominated Lance is he's a humble servant. He's duty shall be done, duty honor country. He just serves. He's an American Legion Post commander. He helps homeless vets. He's executive director of the Friends of the Fish Scale Supply Depot. He has a very important mission, which we're talking about tonight, that I really thought classmates could get behind and we could have really a grassroots fundraising initiative. So we would like classmates to really learn about what he's doing and really just pitch in, because just like you hear the NPR commercials, $25 a month could go a long way. And he's got a very humble, quiet excellence around himself. It may have been part of, being our classmate. It may have been part of being in the FBI and not being able to talk about it. But now that he's retired, I think we'll get some really cool stories out of him, but we'll really get to hear about this nonprofit mission and understand what he's really trying to do right across the river from West Point.
Well, that's a great introduction. So, Lance, welcome to the Old Grad Podcast, and thanks for being part of this. And just curious, Vince, I know you've listened to quite a few podcasts. You're actually in. We actually did a podcast with you a while back. Lance, have you listened recently to the Old Grad Podcast, or do any episodes or any particular classmates come to mind? Episodes that you've listened to in the past?
Yeah, I naturally focused on the Spartans who've been on. I think the last one I had listened to was Brian Mackey's. Um, he's near and dear to my heart. So
Brian Mackey with a big chip on his shoulder about being a December grad, right?
and he should have, because it's a definitely different experience than what we had.
You said that you both read the same. You both had the experience of rooming with the same person.
That's right.
Brian and this as a December grad, and you as a firstie. So who was that? And tell me
Yeah,
some
so my
stories
second
about that.
semester senior year roommate was Sweet Al Brenner. the hockey legend. And because he came back for another semester and Brian was there as well, making up a semester, they roomed together. So that's the link.
Yeah, I remember Brian in his podcast. He said there's probably no finer West Point moment was when Al Brenner got notified that he got that he passed Cal English. I guess
Yes.
he went up to the hockey rink and was just skating back and forth, just waiting for like, and then I think Brian was checking the computer for him to see when it was going to come through, and they called him up and said, "You're good to go."
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. EN 302. What a story. That's a story for the history books about our class. The people that got held up by EN 302, which is no longer even a class. It's been removed from the curriculum, but back in the day, it held up how many of us from graduating on time?
Yeah.
Crazy. So Lance, give me the here and now. Tell me about your family, where you're living, what's going on. Give me the kind of general sit rep.
Yep, I'm in the Hudson Valley, New York, in Fishkill, which is not far from West Point. I've been here since 2008. I'm married to Cindy for 34 years now. She's a wonderful wife and a mother, a really intelligent lady, which I value. Um, we have two daughters. One daughter is 30 years old. She lives in the Albany area. She's a full-time social worker. Her younger sister's 29, living with us now, but transitioning to a apartment in Westchester, and is a full-time registered nurse at White Plains Hospital. So I'm immensely proud of how our two daughters ended up in service jobs, helping people and serving people. That is a point of pride for me and my wife.
I bet. I bet. It takes a very special person to be a nurse. There's no doubt. And it takes an incredibly also very special person to be a social worker. So what does she do? Your social worker daughter, what kind of social work does she do?
Yeah, for years she was at a kind of a home for troubled teens when their parents just couldn't deal with them any longer. Oftentimes they would be referred to this facility in Albany, and she paid her dues there for 5 or 6 years, and was able to then transition to a social worker at a school district, a very nice school district outside of Albany, where where she's a social worker in the elementary school. So she's enjoying having her first summer off, because she definitely paid her dues at the first facility.
That's great. And what kind of a nurse is your other daughter? What does she do?
She's in her unit is called Med Surge. She works nights. So I guess people who come out of surgery and other treatments after the emergency room, she's taking care of. And as far as nursing goes, nights are interesting because, as she explains it, um, there aren't a lot of doctors around, from 7 p.m. until 7 a.m. the next morning. And so the nurses tend to have to think on their feet a little bit more and be very decisive in terms of the care that they deliver. And, White Plains is a major city in New York, so she sees a lot of stuff for a suburban hospital. And she's a take charge kind of gal, so she fits in very well.
Wow, that's amazing. Two tremendous citizens raised by two other tremendous citizens, you and your wife. That's great. Good on
Thank
you.
you.
Congratulations for them too.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you.
so Vince, you moved up there. You said in 2008. It was the bureau that moved you there, right? Or you moved there
Hmm.
because you were serving
Yeah,
in the
that's right.
FBI, right?
Yeah, I had spent 10 years in New York City until 2007, and then was eligible for a transfer to the New York Division's Hudson Valley Resident Agency is what they call it, but it's a satellite office, a smaller office representative of the New York office of the FBI. And so our territory covered 4 counties, including Orange County and West Point. And because I was in the national security field, it brought me to West Point time and time again. I'm surprised I hadn't run into Vince previously because I was over there all the time, but more in a quiet capacity.
Like what kind of stuff would you do at West Point? Like how would they have you there? Is it like for obviously to get qualified on ranges and stuff like that, maybe, but what other reasons would you have to go to West Point?
You'd be surprised at how interesting West Point and its cadets and the officers there are to hostile intelligence services operating in the
Ooh,
United States.
that's
I'll
scary.
put it that way. Yeah, yeah. And so from a defensive standpoint, like a defensive national security standpoint, the FBI would partner with Army intelligence and and try to bring protective measures to West Point. And so that was part of our job.
Hmm. You know,
Yeah.
if you've been to West Point recently in the last like 5 years, you'd notice that a lot of the force protection, physical force protection mechanisms have been removed. There was a point in time in the, I don't know, the mid-teens, like 2014, 2019, where it was really ramped up. I mean, General Williams, I think it was, he invested a lot in force protection. There was like big heavy duty gates and fences. That was all removed. Um, any thoughts on that? I mean, if that is like, I was just curious if you had noticed that yourself, because I know I saw you up there a few times. If you noticed this
Yeah.
force protection things being removed, and if there was a reason for it.
Well, when we went there, when we attended in the 80s and 90s, like many of the Army bases, it was kind of an open post, right? And to some extent, West Point is even used by the U.S. State Department as kind of an extension of foreign policy. State Department they hold a lot of secretive talks and things at West Point, stuff like that. But anyway, um, 9/11 happens and security across the country ramps up. And with West Point being so close to New York City, it was logical, in my mind, that a lot of those measures were put into place. And then I think over time, terrorism, it ebbs and flows to some extent, and maybe that had an impact on the decision to scale things back.
Yeah, I don't know. Are we getting complacent? Maybe. I mean, I'm not sure.
Or we're doing a good job. It's hard to say.
Yeah. So tell me more about. I mean, the FBI is such a fascinating career path that I think around 30 of our classmates, 30, I think 31 to be exact, 31 of our classmates eventually served in the FBI in one capacity or the other. And I also have heard that it is the number one largest employer besides the U.S. Army for our class. Like no other, like General Electric or whatever, big hiring firm. Like that's number one is besides the U.S. Army, the next highest employer is the FBI. What a fascinating. I mean, obviously, when you look back at the hands of time, there's a well-worn path into the FBI, but given the fact that we were the age that we were after 9/11, there's a lot of folks that ended up just gravitating into that role, I think, right?
Yeah, that may be a factor. I can only speak for myself, which is I had aspirations of being a career Army officer. After a few years, I realized I didn't want that lifestyle, but did want to continue serving the U.S. government. And so the FBI was appealing amid the many government agencies, uh, that I could transition to. When I was, see, my second semester plebe year, I roomed with John Fox and Jeff Binney. And at the time, Jeff Binney's dad was an executive with the FBI. He later became deputy director under Louis Freeh. But I recall, Jeff's dad visiting and even, albeit small interactions, with Dave Binney that left an impression with me because I didn't have any connection to the FBI in my past or anything like that. Um, but Jeff's dad had a real presence about him, and Jeff, even as a classmate, he was pretty unflappable. Um, he was a good roommate to have. he and John Fox came at the right time because I was struggling until that semester, kind of wrapping my arms around how to get through West Point.
Mm.
But that impression that Dave Binney left on me, and then Jeff got into the FBI pretty quickly after leaving the Army. Naturally, I stayed in touch with Jeff, and I gravitated toward it.
It's interesting. I mean, so Jeff, as you know, because you served with my uncle. My uncle was a career FBI agent who I just
Yes.
had dinner with last night, and he went to Quantico with Louis Freeh, so maybe he knew Jeff Binney's dad as well. Who knows? He's now an instructor down at Quantico. He retired. He stayed in until like the final moment of the final day. He maxed out. He was old
Yeah.
school, carried a revolver, didn't want to have it, didn't want to have anything other than a revolver. But he, I just, so I had, in a different version of my life, I would have loved to have been an FBI agent. It's just incredible. The service and the impact that you and our other classmates had through that FBI, through that service. Incredible. What were, so, so being in the Hudson Valley, the satellite of New York City, the primary focus is anti-terrorism. Is that kind of where there, or were there other, like, white collar crime? Was there other kind of areas of focus up there?
Yeah, good question. In general terms, the FBI does two types of investigations. You have your traditional criminal investigations, like bank fraud or organized crime, or trying to dismantle gangs, drugs, things like that. And then let's say the other half, speaking in general terms of the FBI, is devoted to national security. So that's countering terrorism, countering intelligence activities, and then countering espionage. And so those agents across the country specialize in those fields in varying degrees, right? Because New York City is home to the United Nations and the stock market and a bunch of really interesting things, there's a heavy national security component of the New York office of the FBI. Whereas if you, let's say, go to Omaha, you may have many more agents devoted to investigating federal crimes, traditional federal crimes, than, let's say, devoted to terrorism or national security. Because in the grand scheme of things, is a terrorist organization likely to carry out an attack on Omaha, Nebraska? That's the same answer I would give my mom when she would ask me, you know, no terrorist organization is going to attack Cleveland, Ohio. It's just not a national symbol, right? And so, yeah, in the New York office, national security is really prominent, and by extension, in the Hudson Valley, because of
Interesting.
West Point, because of IBM, heavy IBM presence. Um, those things are attractive to foreign intelligence services and
There's
terrorists.
also there's also a nuclear reactor over there too, I think, right?
There
Indian
was,
Point.
yep, Indian Point. Yeah, they're
Indian
winding it
Point.
down, but that's
Yeah.
another great point. Yep.
Yeah. I got a
I
whole
know, Lance, when we were when Cynthia and I were binging The Americans, you had implied that you had some work around that periphery and like uncovering some folks. Is that something you can talk about?
Well, I didn't really specialize in investigating the Russians per se, but the Russians and the Chinese, it's no surprise, and it's not classified, that they are traditional past, present, and future threats to the United States, right? And so with a couple hundred Russian diplomats based in New York City, it's reasonable to believe that they get out and around and try to see things and collect information, and that extended to the Hudson Valley. Yeah.
Craig Rooney piped into the chat here. He thinks that maybe the Southgate Tavern was a front for the IRA. Is that possible?
I can't confirm or deny.
All those Irish hooligans down there at the Southgate Tavern. I'll
Yeah.
tell you what is kind of like a little cabal there. I'm going to go offline here a little bit, but the the group of retirees that are in and around West Point. And I'm not talking about retired officers. I'm talking about retired uh, workers from West Point, people that worked at like say the bowling alley, the golf shop, the mess hall. There's like this local like know-how of people that kind of control everything in Highland Falls. But what they really control is they control the tee sheet for trying to get out golfing at West Point, the West Point golf course. Because there's a couple of times I've tried to get out there golfing, and like every day the first like 5 tee slots are taken, right? Every day, like instantly. It opens up and they're instantly taken. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? And Mark West booked us one time for the first. He said, I talked to the guy. We're in for the first tee time at 7:30 in the morning. So we get there at like 7:30 in the morning, and all these old guys roll up to us like, how'd you get this tee time? Like this is, and they're all like retirees. They're all people that like they worked on post in these different areas, and that's how they rule the whole area, the whole like whatever that Orange County is. It was
Well,
hilarious.
is that any different, let's say, than the retired E7, who is the range NCOIC at Fort Hood, who, when you need to get your guys trained and you go to him, he's got the master list, and he's the one who's the gatekeeper.
Something for some reason I have more respect for the retired E7 because he served, because he was in the army,
Yeah.
like here's Mark. He's like, I'm a retired lieutenant colonel. I'm a retired colonel from my wife's a retired colonel, and my father-in-law's a retired colonel, and I can't get a freaking tee time on this West Point golf course
Yeah.
because the bowling alley guys got it locked up for the next 5 weeks. So anyway, um, but Lance, there was one particular incident. I think you can give us a little bit more detail on it too. Like you said, there was like almost, I don't know if it was a sleeper cell. There was some kind of an event that was like national news story that you were directly linked to at the time, right? So what happened there?
Yeah. So it started when I was working in New York City. I think you're referring to this spy case I was involved with at Picatinny Arsenal,
Mm-hmm.
which is in northern New Jersey. Um, but around, I'd say around 2000, mid 2000s, the U.S. government developed some information that in the 70s and 80s, the Cold War, there had been what they call a penetration of the U.S. government at Picatinny Arsenal, which is to say that there was an active spy who was sharing information with a foreign power. And I got the ticket for trying to find and unmask this spy. And it was a unique case because I didn't have a name. Um, I just,
Hold on one second, just to back up. You said
yeah,
you got the ticket. How does that go? Like you have like a supervisor that says, Ashworth, go figure this
yeah.
shit
Well, I
out.
was I was on a national security squad um, that did counterintelligence work, and I had a fairly good reputation for being a good investigator. And so this kind of unique uh, puzzle of an investigation came to New York because um, the one shred of evidence that we had was that the same intelligence officer who handled Jonathan Pollard, the famous Navy spy from the 1980s, um, was also the handler for someone who penetrated Picatinny Arsenal. Does that make sense? And so,
Okay.
because of the New York connection, and let's say to that point, because of my set of skills as an investigator, I got the investigation to try to identify the person by name and expose whether they indeed had spied for a foreign country. In this case, it was Israel. That's a kind of a daunting request, wouldn't you say? You don't have a name. You know the army base that a person X works at, and you know that person was had to have somehow had a connection to this Israeli official in the 1980s and given him U.S. classified information to send back to Israel. That was
Hmm.
basically the fact pattern I was given. And so, how do you start? How do you start with that? And I'm not, fortunately, as I mentioned to Vince in the lead up, this case went to prosecution. So a lot of the stuff was unclassified, which means I can kind of talk about it more freely. But in terms of how you start along the traditional lines of how a compromise could take place. Um, and these are themes that appear in security background investigations that all of us underwent, right? Have you had contacts with a foreign official? Have you traveled to a foreign country? Have you disclosed classified information in an unauthorized manner? And so the way I looked at it, I thought, well, here we have Picatinny Arsenal. Let's say I just picked a time period. I picked like 1975 to 85. I said, let me try to find out anybody there who may have um, traveled to Israel during that time or came up on a security incident report for having disclosed classified information accidentally, or somebody who disclosed that they had foreign contact with Israeli officials. Because what's unique about Israel is we have a lot of contact with them, authorized contact, right? They're a close partner of ours. So that's what I did. I basically started pouring through old employee files of different folks at Picatinny Arsenal in an effort to collect those data points who may have
So
had
how does that actually happen? Like, do you go to some like office where there's like a file cabinet with everybody's employee records and you go through it, or is there somebody that you connect with in
yeah,
Picatinny? How does that work?
yeah. I relied heavily on Army intelligence, the 902nd Military Intelligence Group, who assigned one of their officers to me as kind of a partner. And we went to the personnel office at Picatinny. If you know anything about that base, it's unique in that it's primarily civilians, right? It's an
Mm.
R&D base where they make warheads and things like that,
It's the
munitions.
Army Munitions
Yeah,
Center of Excellence. Yeah.
yeah. So we went to the personnel office um, and basically asked for that set of data. Hey, we want employee files for people who were active from 75 to 85 who um, may
And,
have.
well, let me ask the Army officer that you're talking to,
Yep.
how much are you able to inform them of what you're looking for? Like, do
Yeah.
they
So he,
know?
yeah, he was the 902nd Military Intelligence Group agent that partnered with us. Um, was a civilian with a top secret clearance. So we were basically able to read him into the crux of the case. Hey,
Okay,
we're looking for somebody who spied and gave these secrets over.
interesting.
Yeah. So so that's what we did. We just started looking through employee files and building out kind of a matrix and where the most data points would be collected, it kind of appears off the page. You kind of see the trends on who might make a good candidate. Okay. Um,
By the way, is it just you, or is you're working in a group? Like, do you have like, associates or junior, like FBI agents working for you, or is it like I'm picturing like what I see in the
right.
movie, so I
Yeah,
don't
no,
know.
no. These are great questions. So I was what they call the lead agent because the case started in New York and it was focused on this Israeli official who had uh, who had controlled Jonathan Pollard as a spy. And then because the compromise took place at Picatinny Arsenal, there was an FBI agent from Newark who was partnered up with me uh, to help out with the interests in that territory. And then because of the Army base was the Army intelligence guy. So the three of us worked on this together. And we could rely on analysts and things from headquarters an occasional translator we would need. But basically, it was the three of us just grinding it out.
And how does the work? This is fascinating to me because how do you identify who's doing what? Because are you all kind of peers, like a little triumvirate? You're the lead agent, so are you delegating to them? How does that actually work?
Yeah, so I would conduct most of the investigation and make the decisions on what steps were next. But let's say if it involved, well, let's say we had a suspect and we decided we wanted to surveil him, right? Physically follow him. If it was taking place in New Jersey, then the Newark agent would help to set it up and kind of coordinate it because that was his territory, right? I was over in New York, he was in Newark, so that's kind of how it went. But in terms of the main decision making, it was mine to make, really.
And did you surveil the guy? Like you had to do surveillance and like stakeouts and try to figure out what was happening with this?
We didn't. It took a long time to identify this guy, starting from not having a first or last name to identifying the actual guy. And part of it, we got lucky, and this appears in the affidavit that's been published, is that at the time of the, and are you familiar with the Jonathan Pollard case at all?
No.
Okay, well, look it up. Look it up after the podcast. He's one of the most damaging spies in U.S. history. Um, he's a naval cryptologist, I think, is what he was. But anyway, at the time of that investigation in the mid 1980s, um, there were a few pages of phone records that were obtained from the phone company for the Israeli official who was connected to this U.S. Navy analyst. And through research and through looking through old files and things like this, I stumbled across these records that had been subpoenaed, and they represented a snapshot for a few months of this Israeli official's phone that I was trying to connect to a spy that I didn't even know his name, who was in New Jersey. You following me?
Hmm.
So I had these, let's say, 40 different phone numbers in the New York area. So I started looking at ones that he had called in New Jersey, and I compared them to the matrix of information that I had for suspects that I was looking at Picatinny Arsenal. And I got lucky because on an old passport application for an engineer, he had listed his phone number that was an exact match to a phone number that had been called by this Israeli official something
Hmm.
like 7 times over the course of 3 months.
Hmm.
And
So
so
all
that
came
was
down
my
to just a phone number being the same.
that was my light bulb moment. I was like, how can this be? Because, if you're a clearance holding engineer at Picatinny Arsenal, a United States official, and you're talking to what is arguably a bad actor, an Israeli guy who's associated with a famous spy case and then flees the country, that's something you should report or be telling somebody or get clearance for, right? So the fact that none of that was disclosed caused me to say, hey, I might be onto something here. And it turned out that was the guy we were looking for.
So at the end of the day, what happens is he's convicted, sentenced. Is he in jail still, or like what happened?
Oops. So keep in mind, since he was like a Cold War spy, that by the time I found him, it was 2008. He was already in his 80s. He had
Hmm.
been retired for like 20 years. And so we got a tremendous amount of information out of him and a full confession. Um, we approached him and I contacted him and I told him I was an FBI agent and I was looking for help about a compromise that took place at Picatinny Arsenal in the 1980s. And right away he said, "Oh, I can help you. I know a Ukrainian guy that I'm convinced was working for the KGB, right? Because he had worked with some Ukrainian guy that he was always suspicious of. He never thought himself would be under the microscope." And so I said, yeah, I go, listen, we can't talk about that over the phone, but why don't you come down to the office and I'm anxious to hear everything that you have to say, and you can help us. And then through interrogation techniques, I was able to flip it on him and get him to confess to all sorts of secret documents that he gave the
So these
Israelis.
interrogation techniques, they're fascinating to me, right? Because so you went through interrogation training, like you're learning how to pick up on these subtle clues about how people are saying something or and being able to then pull more information out of them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I was fortunate enough to go to like an interrogation course prior, in the lead up to this event, and all the techniques that the FBI prescribed in this course, I just followed the playbook, and they worked perfectly. It's a
Really?
subtle. It's the yeah they and it's kind of like a dance almost. Um, where you're slowly leading the person into telling a story that they otherwise wouldn't want to tell, but that they have to tell. They have to get it off their chest. There's psychological reasons for it. There are a whole host of reasons, but it works.
So like what's your interrogation 101? Like or like let's go back, turn back the hands of time to, 15, 18 years ago, and one of your daughters comes home and says, "Oh, Dad, I was here," or I was like, do you find it like useful in another context, like when you're dealing with like your kids or with somebody else? Like, how does that
When
manifest
I'm dealing
itself?
with Vince, yes,
When you're
yes, of
dealing with Vince?
course.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
told Lance that I watched all 19 episodes of Criminal Minds, so that's my training.
yeah, he's qualified. My, I'll answer it this way. My main beef with shows that depict the FBI or any other law enforcement situation is that um, good good investigators always ask open-ended questions. They start with the words, "Tell me how," or "Tell me why." They never they never ask a closed-ended question like, "Were you there?" Blah blah blah, or "Did you do this?" It's always open-ended because it psychologically forces the person to answer and start speaking. And that's the way information is collected. And as you're collecting information in one of these conversations that turns into an interrogation, if you've done it right, you've collected enough pieces that you string together and then put back on the person. Um, and that was the case with this guy. I had led him down this path of, um, hey, there was this compromise, and we're aware that the person traveled overseas during this time. And I have a microfiche here that shows that you traveled during that time. Where did you travel? Oh, I traveled to Israel. Oh, no joke. Okay. So he thinks that we're talking about a Russian compromise or a KGB compromise, but I'm asking him questions that I'm later going to turn on him
Hmm.
to get the confession.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So this guy was, I think when I arrested him, he was either 81 or 82. He was in bad health. And he ended up what they call allocuting and essentially admitting to the crimes. So they gave him sort of a light sentence, even though the damage he did was pretty grave. A combination of him being old, maybe some politics involved, um, but he essentially admitted in open court to all the crimes, having been an agent of a foreign government and compromising classified information and all that kind of stuff.
Did he get paid for this, like from the Israeli government? Was there like an economic benefit that he derived from it, or was it just the psychological
Well, he
connection?
didn't. He he was an interesting case. He was born in Connecticut, but at age 2, this is the 1920s, mind you, his family, which was Jewish, got swept up in the Zionism movement. And so his dad moved the family to British Palestine. And so my subject ended up being raised in Israel and fought in the Haganah and all that kind of stuff.
I see.
And then his dad wanted one of the sons to return to the United States and make a life, and he got selected by his dad to, try to come to college in the U.S. So he
Mhm.
returned to the U.S. after World War II and became an engineer and ended up working at Picatinny also.
Interesting.
Yeah, so to answer your question more directly, he didn't do it for money. He did it for ideology,
Hmm.
you know.
So we spent a lot of time on this, but before we move off the FBI stories, you ended up in Moscow also, right? You were there's a picture of you that we used to promote this podcast of you in Red Square with an A2 flag over in Moscow. Like, how did that
Yeah,
happen?
yeah.
For
So
Founders Day.
late in my career, I had done some short-term TDYs overseas because I always had an interest in serving overseas. And then late in my career, an opportunity to come came up to apply to be what they call an assistant legal attaché at the embassy in Moscow. And legal attaché is really a fancy title for like a law enforcement liaison, um, where there are about 200 embassies around the world. I think the FBI is represented in about a third of them, and our representatives, who are legal attaches and assistant legal attaches, work with the home country to cooperate on international crime that touches both countries. So let's say there's somebody in the United States who's trying to break into the banking system in the Netherlands. The Netherlands police are investigating it, but the subject is back in the United States. And so the FBI, let's say, comes together with the Netherlands National Police to try to make a prosecution, right? And exchange information and bring the guy to justice. Um, Even though there's not a ton of that when it comes to Russia, there is some police cooperation. And for strategic reasons, it's just good to have an open channel with the Russians because the main partner when I was in Moscow was the FSB, which is the modern day KGB, the Internal Security Service of Russia, that's largely promulgating the current war. So I got this position as assistant legal attaché um, and went over there in February 2022, just about 3 weeks before the war. And for a variety of reasons, my boss, who was the chief, the legal attaché, um, he and his family had to return to the United States in June of 2022, and I stepped into his shoes as the principal, basically the U.S. government's law enforcement liaison to the Russians. So the FSB
During the Ukraine war.
during the Ukraine war. Yeah.
Insane. So like what happens? Like when this whole thing cooks off, like first where are you living? Like is there like a are you living in a local economy? Like what's your day? Like you wake up in the morning, somebody can you tell that somebody's watching you? They had to be surveilling you, right?
Yeah. So we nearly all of the U.S. staff lived within the embassy walls. It's a very, very large compound in Moscow, about a mile from Red Square. And so we lived in an apartment inside the embassy. And anytime you left the embassy grounds, of course, you were being watched and all that kind of stuff. But you get used to it and you get trained to detect it and ignore it. Just kind of becomes a fact of life. But yeah, the war kicks off, and the most immediate impact was that all of our credit cards wouldn't work because the sanctions were put into place, right? So, what do you do for cash when your credit card can't be used on the Moscow economy? So, there was this really clever workaround that the embassy treasury office enacted, which is they would basically diplomatic pouch money from the United States to the embassy, and then we would basically buy the money off of the embassy and then take it to a money changer and convert it to rubles and use it on the Russian economy. It was crazy.
Wow.
The other thing that changed overnight was the flights, because when I went out there in early February, I took a direct flight from on Aeroflot from JFK straight to Moscow. That was about an 8.5 hour flight. Afterwards, because all the Western carriers weren't allowed to go to Russia, the quickest way to get home was about 23 hours worth of flying, either through Dubai or Doha, Istanbul. But those routes, they didn't exist previously. Nobody would fly from Moscow to Doha to get to New York. You just fly Moscow to New York. So there were long delays at the airports while the system was resetting itself. It's terrible.
So how long did you ultimately stay there? You're February 2022 till when?
July of 2024.
So I mean that's like that's a long time, and a lot happened during the time period.
Very historic. Yeah, just thinking off the top of my head, there was the coup attempt by that guy Prigozhin.
Yes.
Um, Gorbachev died. Navalny was murdered by the Russian regime. The sanctions kicked in. There were drone strikes close to the embassy. It was crazy. It was arguably, it was the best assignment I ever had, but it was intense.
Hmm.
And then what's interesting is that, from a diplomatic standpoint, the main functions of the embassy kind of ground to a halt, right? Like our U.S. diplomats weren't really meeting with the Russian diplomats because there just wasn't a lot to discuss. We were at loggerheads. But from a law enforcement standpoint, really, justice is blind to that. So we continue to have contact and exchanges with the Russian police and security services when it met our common needs, right? So international terrorism or child pornography or human trafficking. These are crimes, international crimes that neither country tolerates and each country cooperates with the other on.
Hold on a second. I gotta
It's
I gotta
mind
let that
blowing.
sink in. I have to let that sink in. So and so it's almost like we're at war with you have counterparts with whom we're at war with,
Yep.
but there is a common enemy in fighting child pornography or international terrorism. So we're going to put our differences aside to ensure that these things, the dark web, all that stuff, that we're making sure that there is some shred of good over evil as we both see it in the world, that we're pursuing that, right? Is that basically
Yeah,
the
that's well stated. I look at it this way, is that, we're longtime enemies of Russia, right? The Soviet Union, Russia. And you would say to yourself, well, why would we help them on international terrorism? Wouldn't we just want to kind of let that chaos happen inside of Russia, knowing that it's going to weaken them on the world stage? But the truth is that the US government and the FBI, by extension, we value human life. And if innocent civilians, whether they're Russian, Chinese, Cuban, or anywhere in the world, if we know about it or we get a tip about it, we are definitely going to share that with that country for the sake of protecting innocent human lives.
wow? That's
Yeah,
next
and that was the
level.
essence of the job. We should all be very proud that in the wake of 9/11, the U.S. government's ability to spot terrorism hotspots around the world is unprecedented. You know, our resources, and our partnerships around the globe make it so that we know what just about everything is going on, quite honestly.
So is that reciprocal, do you think? Like, does Russia share that same perspective, or China? Like, Craig Rooney has a question for you, which is like, what are your concerns about Chinese nationals getting college educations in the US? Like, do we do we like does that change by different countries?
Well, the Russians didn't share a lot, right, about, let's say, uh, emerging terrorism that might impact the U.S. And I think it's
Hmm.
because they weren't capable of spotting it or detecting it, whereas
Hmm.
we can. And even if it's internal to Russia, even if we sense that there's some unrest that's brewing in Russia, sometimes we would know that before they did, and we would be alerting them to problems they didn't know that they had. That's how good we are.
Wow.
Um, Yeah. As far as the Chinese, to answer Craig's question, um, yeah, what's interesting is there's been a lot of criticism about the FBI and its inability to, stop spying and stop our technology being stolen. And some of the critics have said that, the FBI needs to be torn in half and reassembled like the British model, which is MI5. The security agency is separate from MI6 and is separate from Scotland Yard, right? Three separate agencies. But they're missing the point. The point is not our ability to catch the spies. It's a question of numbers. We allow so many, for instance, Chinese into this country year in, year out, lawfully on visas, whether it's student visas or business visas or whatever, that the number of FBI agents available to thwart the ability of the Chinese government to collect on the US is so lopsided, we'll never get it done. It's really a question of presence management, is what I would call it, not the abilities of the FBI.
Hmm. This is fascinating. I feel like I'm talking too much about the FBI. I want to go back.
Yeah.
I want to reel back to the typical arc of our podcast. But before I do that, I want to say, Lance, hats off to you. Hats off to our other classmates who continue to serve through the FBI. What a tremendous impact you've had, and a service you've had to our country. So much. There's only a few things you get to talk about. There's so much more that you don't get to talk about, I'm sure. And so let's go back to 1987, high school. Where did you get the idea to come to West Point? What intrigued you about it? Walk me through that journey up to our day and through West Point. Let's talk about some of our amazing classmates that we get to know along the way as well.
Got it. Yeah. So I didn't really know much about West Point. I didn't come from a military family. I scored well on the PSAT. I just got a flyer in the mail from West Point. Um,
In
you
Cleveland,
know,
Ohio, right?
in Cleveland, Ohio. Yeah. And the flyer piqued my interest. So I learned a little bit about it. And I mainly applied to West Point. I won't lie, for economic reasons, because we did not have a lot of money. My dad had left my mom with four kids, and it was either get a full scholarship somewhere or work my way through college or do something like that.
Where do you
And
fall in the four?
the youngest,
You're the youngest. Okay, so you already had other siblings that were moving on their journey out of the house at
right,
this point, right?
right,
Okay.
yeah. So I got, based on just that flyer I got interested in West Point. I made the mistake of making a visit to West Point between my junior and senior years of high school when none of the cadets were at West Point. So I
Hmm.
just literally visited the grounds. I thought it was beautiful. I was like, oh,
Like
this
spring
is,
break, you're there for spring break or some other time or
well, like
summer.
summer, yeah, summer
Okay.
recess, really. Yeah, right. Um, and then applied. I did a good job on my application. I was early admission. And yeah, so showed up on our day. And I didn't really have an appreciation of what was about to hit me. I
Did
was
you get to
struggling.
know any of the other Ohio classmates that were like before you go to West Point? Do they like the local parents group or the local society get you all together? Like Cleveland, I think was Totes. Totes was from Akron. I think Sharon DeCrane was from.
He's from outside of Cleveland. Yeah.
Yeah, I know she's a big Guardians fan.
Hmm.
Um, and she's in my company chat. We're always razzing each other on sports stuff. And she's also a fellow FBI agent with you,
Yes.
Sharon Crane.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Um,
I don't remember if there was one of those big gatherings. The only the only one I knew really headed to West Point was a guy who went to my rival high school, but who was a good friend nonetheless, was Greg Recker from
okay.
H1. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. We ran track and cross country against each other and stuff in high school. I got to know Greg pretty well.
that's great. That's cool.
Yeah.
So then you get there. So you show up. You didn't know very much. Who dropped you off? Did you go by yourself? Did your family escort you there for the
Yeah,
first day?
I think we my mom was with me all the way until New York City, and then I think that's where we said goodbye. And I roomed with Slater the night before the bus ride to West Point. You know, John
Okay.
Slater.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I roomed with him in a hotel prearranged, and then took the bus to the gymnasium
So
the
90
next
second
morning.
goodbye or 60-second goodbye is no big deal to you. You're just in the audience by yourself with your backpack. That's it, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. So I didn't really know what to expect because I didn't realize the entire like hazing methodology of West Point. Um, and I hadn't visited when any cadets were at West Point. So I just thought it was going to be kind of like an Army basic training where I was going to be running a lot. So I was really, really thrown off.
It's amazing. I mean, I gotta believe that today there's no way that a kid comes in there with no idea like you. But there are like you, many of our classmates that had no idea what they were in for uh, during this whole experience. I can only imagine. Like you show up, you're like, "Holy cow! What did I get myself into?"
Yeah, not my proudest moment, I'll say that. But I did know that, the school's prestigious, and I knew that if I stuck it out, I'd be a full scholarship. So those things were attractive for sure.
So tell me about some memories of like the early days of Beast Barracks showing up. Who's your roommate? Like what happens? What memorable things during basic training or plebe year do you recall?
Well, like I was telling Vince just before you joined, I thought that the guys who came from the prep school were immensely helpful because they had been through some of it. They knew how to shine their shoes and prep their uniform. Um, they weren't really phased by all the hazing and stuff like that. So guys like Tony Nicosia, who was a prepster who didn't end up graduating, but also Ted Harvilla, who's a lifelong friend. Those guys, were kind of the steadying force for people like me who were really
How about was
struggling pretty
Herrera?
hard.
Were the Herreras? Were they prepsters?
Yeah, no, I don't think they were prepsters.
No,
Sal and Saul,
no. Okay,
no.
No, just
Um,
Vic and I were prepsters, and then half of the Lazowski twins.
right.
yeah. So, the first until I roomed with John Fox and Jeff Binney, um, yeah, it was tough on me, and it was tough academically. I remember coming home for Thanksgiving break, and at that point, I was carrying something like a 2.2 or 2.1 grade average, something very low, something
That's
unusual for
solid.
me,
That's solid. That's solid. Come on.
right? But unusual for me. And my mom, she started to like get up in my business about, oh, you could flunk out, ruin this opportunity or whatever. And like that military side of me kicked in, even though it was a very light imprint. And I was just like, you better listen here. I'm doing everything I can to hang on. Um, I got to get through this thing on my own, but I am, I'm not failing for any other reason than this is the toughest thing I've ever done in my life.
Mm.
And it was tough. And I had aspirations of being like a mechanical engineer because I was pretty good in high school with math and
What'd you
science and
make?
crafting. And
What'd you
I
major
I
in?
I ended up majoring in
All right.
French and world history. Yeah, because the academics were too much. I almost failed out because of plebe math for sure.
Vonette Monteith, Vonette Couch, our classmate,
Hmm.
said that she made. I had dinner with her. I don't know, like a few months ago. I just remember this. She said when we're like when we were trying to figure out our majors, the person from the French department got up and said, "If you choose French as a major, you will not fail any class. We will." Like it was like it was like a deal. Like choose French, and we guarantee you
Yeah,
you will not fail. We will not fail you in a class.
yeah. Well, I had some French in high school, so that was an easy choice for me.
Yeah, that's cool. Can you still
Yeah,
speak it at all?
I can, and I used a little bit of it in the FBI, and yeah, I used it again when I was in Russia because one of our closer partners over there was like the French National Police, so they used to
Okay,
have me over to their embassy all the time for cocktails.
well, that's cool.
Yeah, yeah, but But yeah, it was tough.
And then you did
Um,
Model UN with Marty Cuzzillo. You said that was like a proud moment of yours, was doing Model UN as you're the CIC for that, right?
yes, yeah, I didn't really. The name of the club when we were going there was the West Point Forum, and so initially that plebe year, I didn't find the club because I was kind of looking for Model UN, which I had done in high school. But when I eventually stumbled on it and joined it as a yearling, I really enjoyed it. Um, and then honestly, Marty should have been the club president and cadet in charge, but as I recall, he left for Navy for a semester our junior year, and that's kind of the time when they were looking for the CIC for the next year to start taking over the club. And so I stepped into that role. But honestly, when Marty returned for our senior year, he and I together ran the thing, and we had a great time.
And you guys like won everything, right? Like there was what happened?
Yeah, we there were, of the like four main conferences that we would go to each year, there were two really big ones, one at Harvard and another one was at Georgetown. We won two out of our four conferences our senior year on the backs of the debating skills of Marty Cuzzillo and Rick Graham, our other classmate, was in Model UN. And then a a guy from the class of '92 that we lost, Scott Belville. He took over the club after I left, but he was great too. Yeah,
What do you mean we lost him? He passed away?
he passed away. Yeah, Scott passed away prematurely. He was a 150s player, and he was a good friend to Steve Shalhoub from Vince's company, football player. Yeah, I tailgated with Scott and Steve Shalhoub and our classmate Tom O'Donnell for years. But yeah,
Tom O'Donnell, another FBI agent, right?
yeah, he was one time in Hudson Valley. We were partners.
Wow. So
Great, great guy.
so how many of our classmates did you intersect with professionally in the FBI?
I anticipated you would ask me that question, so I wrote him down. I think Pat Kern was in the New York office when I first got there. I'm forever indebted to Pat because as a new agent, you're trying to get involved with as many arrests and big operations as you can. It seemed like Pat had one every month. He was just killing it as an organized crime investigator. And so he would assign me to these arrest teams when I was just like a new probationary agent, which was a lot of fun. But Pat Kern, Tom O'Donnell, who started in Washington, D.C., but transferred up to New York to be closer to Scranton. Karen Walsh, she was another one I interacted with. And to some extent, on some of the national security work, Ed Falkowski. Yeah. A little bit with Brian Turner, but I mean, Brian was a rock star. He was at the upper echelons of the FBI. Grunts like me don't often cross his path.
Yeah. You mentioned to me too, you said, by the way, we're going back to the FBI, but we're not going to forget about West Point, but I want to go back to this other point from the pre-call. You said that one of the things that you were a little disappointed by in the FBI was the lack of training agents. So you have a quote unquote training agent, but there's really not a formal mentorship, leadership, growth, professional growth aspect of it, right?
Yeah, and my experience again is really mainly in the New York office. But while I was assigned, let's say, a training agent, um, I didn't find that there was like a formal curriculum around learning the job from the training agent. It's not like you're shadowing them or you're partnering with them on everything. Um, it's a gap that could be improved, primarily because agents are very autonomous in their investigations. When you're assigned an investigations, it's essentially yours to decide how to conduct and and resolve, whether it's in a criminal prosecution or for national security, if it means disrupting or kicking somebody out of the country. Um, and that autonomy it's learned over time, but a good training agent program could could hasten that process.
Yeah. And what made me think of that was you mentioned Brian Turner, and I know that he's a senior level in the FBI, and I know that was mentorship was like his whole like his big thing, his big mantra was just building a culture of learning and coaching. That was one of his passions as he was leading in the FBI. But
Hmm.
so let's get back to West Point, more of the antics of West Point. How many hours did you walk?
I don't know, maybe 10 or 11. Not too much.
No big slugs, just stupid 8 and 4 type stuff.
Yeah, lateness here or there, something like that.
If you could go back in time and relive a moment of West Point, when you think about like your 4 years there, what would be the what would you want to go back to if you could go back to for like whatever an hour or a day or a week? What would you do?
Hmm. Um, well, that's a good question. I hadn't thought of that. I would say first semester, yearling year. I roomed with Brad Woods and Brian Mackey, and Vince will appreciate this. Most of uh, Second Regiment, First Battalion was in Bradley Short, right? And so A2 usually would have floors 1 and 2 at Bradley Short as a company. Well, somehow, I don't know if there were too many plebes or what it was, but that yearling year, we got stuck on the third floor, actually on Bradley Long. There were like 2 or 3 A2 rooms up there, and ours was one of them. And I think Doug Peters and Todd Schmidt might have been right next to us. But anyway, we were kind of this outpost of A2. We were semi-autonomous. We had good plebes, um, and just the whole pressure of plebe year was behind us, and we were yearlings, and the three of us had a ball as roommates. Um, just a just great guys to room with for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a nice time.
those are good points. How about any particular low points like failing a test or getting your lip busted open in plea boxing or anything
You
like
know
that?
that story. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if it was bleed boxing. Um, let's see, low points. Here's a low point is in cow year intramural lacrosse. I got basically sandwiched between 2 opposing players, and I didn't know it at the time, but my lung had collapsed.
Oh my God.
And so I went back to the barracks and I slept it off. The next morning, I felt like fluid, sloshing around my lungs. So I went to sick call, ended up in Keller for 3.5 weeks,
Oh my
and
God, really?
had successive chest tubes because the first one wouldn't take. And I was, according to the doctor, I was like on my deathbed. He told my mom if the second chest tube hadn't done its business, I probably would have expired.
No kidding.
Yeah,
All from intramural lacrosse.
intramural lacrosse, it's legit. Yeah, so I was
Yeah.
behind on my studies and I had to catch up. I almost went to summer school, but I was able to somehow pull it off, grades wise. Maybe because I was taking French.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a low point.
What did you do for like, did you do CTLT, DCLT, like which Beast or Buckner? Like what were your jobs like as a
Yeah,
cow
my
enforcer?
summers.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So my summers, I did DCLT at Fort Hood. Craig Rooney was, or, I'm sorry, Fort Knox. Craig Rooney was there. But that's when I really got close to Mike Burke, who I consider a lifelong friend from E2.
Hmm.
Um, so Mike Burke and Tim Bowler were there. Um, that
Tim
was a
Bowler's
good
got a
time.
kid. He's got a kid at West Point right now, I think in the plebe
Oh,
class.
that's cool.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
he's a good dude.
Don't quote me on that,
And
but
then
I'm pretty sure that. Yeah.
the three of us ended up going straight to jump school right after DCLT. So we had like a summer together, which was a lot
So
of fun.
you did, which is the worst way to do airborne school. You did it as a cadet, right? So you're getting. I went there as an officer, which was awesome. It was a
Yeah.
gentleman's course, like 4 p.m. See you later. See you tomorrow, alphas.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. You were the lowest of the low as a cadet for sure.
Yeah.
And then because of that lacrosse injury, I ended up getting assigned to like the Buckner staff, not as a, not like involved with the companies, but on the planning staff,
Hmm.
basically in the headquarters. And I would write the weekly plans and stuff for the training,
Cool.
the
So
S3
then
shop. Yeah.
let's fast forward now. You're getting to the point where you're getting ready to graduate, and you selected what branch?
Artillery.
FA, OBC. That sounds like it was
Hmm.
an amazing time. There's a lot of our classmates that were there all at the same time. That was like they finally like released the hounds out of West Point. You got to all be like you're like you had the same uh kind of like venomous spirit of being a firstie, but now you were a second lieutenant with no responsibility and a paycheck, right? So what was that like?
Yeah, but it backfired. I don't know if you ever heard that story. The West Point groups kind of went in two groups, two big groups in the summer of '91. My group started in July, so I had about a month off after graduation, and then reported to Fort Sill, I think July 7th or so.
Hmm.
Anyway, and there were a whole bunch of classmates in there. My roommate John Dinges, who was my Spartan company mate, he and I roomed together. But Bern Christensen was in there, Rich Campbell,
Bernie. Bernie's my
Bubba
company
Leck.
mate.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there were a lot of West Pointers. Anyway, after like the first big test, which for artillerymen was like the fuses test, you had to memorize the fuses and the setting on the fuses and stuff for the different projectiles. As a class, the West Pointers did horribly. I mean, horribly. And so after that test, our entire class, our OBC class, was in an auditorium for some kind of lecture. And then there was some colonel who was a West Point grad who said, okay, today's lecture is done. I want all the West Point grads in this class to stay put. And we got dressed down by this guy. I mean, it was like a buck up, but at OBC. You know what I'm talking about? Like you better
Yeah.
get your shit together because you're embarrassing yourself. And then after that, it was like, we had like probably the class honor grad and all that kind of stuff. But man, we got our tails whipped.
Hmm. So that
Yeah.
guy, he was a colonel or was like lieutenant colonel?
Oh, good question. He
Oh,
was
he
he
was a
was an
senior.
officer. He was an officer higher ranking than I.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I'll say. Why were you there?
No, I wasn't there. I was an engineer. I was an engineer. I just heard the stories. I heard the one story that I remember, and maybe you were at this party or not, where everybody it was a Halloween party and everybody dressed up as somebody else's mother.
Yeah, well, I may have pictures of that. Yes. Yeah. You've got good intel. You could have been FBI for sure.
Well, you know what? There's a lot of FA guys like Bern Christensen, Rich Campbell, who was Mark Potter, like a
Yeah.
bunch of F1 guys went artillery. So I just
Yeah.
remember the stories. And I felt like the engineers, we just moved out to Missouri and it was desolate. There's nothing there for us, but
So
Hmm.
Alex Rogers just chimed in the actual Lieutenant Colonel Marati's name.
Oh, he's got his name. That's classic. Yeah,
Yeah.
Alex. Alex, yeah,
Man,
he's a
Alex,
some of
good
you
dude.
guys are elephant memories, man.
he is a West Point encyclopedia, that dude.
He's
He
great.
knows everything. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So then where was your first assignment? Where'd you go?
Really, my one and only assignment was Fort Hood. Yeah,
Okay.
so I was one of those who benefited from the kind of the Clinton drawdown of the army. So
Right.
just after 4 years, I made captain, and then like a week or two later, I separated. And so it was all
And
all Fort Hood.
your wife, you said you were married 34 years, so it must be right around this time you got married too, right?
Yeah, a year after graduation. Yeah, and she's from Marlboro, which is just north of Newburgh in
Okay.
southern Ulster County.
Did you meet her at West Point?
Yeah,
How'd you guys?
Eric Hamilton Jones, who was my first semester plebe roommate and a Spartan, of course. He was one of those guys who was on track to being one of the 2 percenters or 4 percenters or whatever that
Mhm.
percentage is. But his girlfriend of 3+ years broke up with him first a year.
Mm-hmm.
And he came to me and he's like, I need a designated driver. He goes, I want to go down to Westchester, down toward Marymount. So I drove him down to Marymount, and he drank away his sorrows while I stayed sober. And my wife, whose younger sister happened to be attending Marymount, was in the same bar, and she was visiting. She was chaperoning her younger sister and her girlfriends who were doing the same thing as Eric, having a good time. And so we were kind of like the two sober ones in the bar. And honestly, I told Craig Rudy this. I think as soon as I met her, I was like, I got to marry this woman. She is just beautiful.
Wow.
And another small story is that at the end of the night after talking with her, I said, hey, do you mind if I take your phone number? And I reached for like a pen and a napkin to write it down. And she, not realizing the memorization skills that any cadet has, said to me, she tried to call my bluff. She's like, well, if you want my phone number, you're going to have to memorize it. So I did. And that was it.
How about that?
Yeah.
And so you got married a year after West Point. So you were out of eight. Was it
Yep.
before your first assignment that you
No,
were
I was squarely at Fort Hood.
Okay, nice, nice.
Yeah, and
And
we were
then
down there. We were down there just after that original shooting happened, when a civilian, walked into a Luby's cafeteria and shot like 22 people. That
mhm,
happened just a couple months before I got there.
wow.
And then while I was at Fort Hood, the Branch Davidian thing happened in Waco with David Koresh,
Yep.
and the maneuver battalion that I was assigned to as a fire support officer deployed to Waco. It was a unit that rolled on the compound. That was
Yeah,
crazy.
Scott Brender. I don't know if you remember him. Scott Brender was at Fort Hood with you at the time. That was his
Ah,
combat engineer vehicle that breached a wall and
that's
started the
crazy.
fire. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean, he
crazy.
wasn't his unit. I guess they gave it to the FBI of all people. It went to the FBI, the CEV, and these
Yep,
guys, I guess they had FBI people operating his combat engineer vehicle.
that's
Yeah,
crazy.
that was crazy. That was crazy.
Yeah.
So then you when you got out, you worked a series of other jobs on your way to the FBI, right? So you were not
Yes.
like you
Yeah,
didn't go right into the FBI. So
that's right. Yeah, I just took a temp job at a like a manufacturing facility outside of Fort Hood that turned into be a major corporation. I was telling Vince that his former roommate Bob Mandel was working there as a corporate job, but I was there working as a temp. It's called Wilson
mhm,
Art. Um, Makes like laminate for your home and for displays, static displays. So I was
mm,
working there as a temp and distinguished myself, and they hired me directly to run a department from having been a temporary worker. And I ran a manufacturing department for about 4 months, and they promoted me again to basically run their warehouse in Columbus, Ohio, which is my home state. So it was from Columbus, Ohio that I was able to get into the FBI.
mhm. And then that walks us back up to present day, and then you retire from the
Hmm.
FBI. But
Hmm.
before you retire from the FBI, one day you're on your way to work and you see a little sign. And tell me about
Yes,
that story. So how does this full circle moment come back to present
yeah,
day?
full circle. Yeah, so I see, on my way home from work each day here in the Hudson Valley, I would see this little sign stuck in the ground at the corner of the intersection where I would sit at the traffic light, and it basically said something to the effect of, help us save a Revolutionary War site. Call blah blah blah. So I called the number and joined this little grassroots group that was, excuse me, trying to save a Revolutionary War site where um, the bodies of 8 soldiers had just been identified through an archaeological exam. And within a few months' time, the president of the group had to step down, and she voted me in as the president. And that was 2010. And I've basically been working on that project with a number of other people, including my brother back in Cleveland, who is our webmaster, for the last 16 years. And I did some of it while I was on duty with the FBI as like an additional outside employment, even though there was no pay involved, just outside activity. And then after having gone to Russia and returning and retiring, I am jumping into it full on.
And what is the mission of the organization? First of all, what's the name? What's the website? So we could see what that is. And
Yeah,
what,
so the name of the group is the Friends of the Fishkill Supply Depot. So Fishkill is obviously the town I live in. By the way, it's a Dutch word which means fish creek. Um, but it tends to be a little bit misunderstood. Anyway, Fishkill Supply Depot, Friends of the Fishkill Supply Depot. And the quick down and dirty elevator pitch is that where Interstate 84 intersects with Route 9, which is the Post Road, Albany Post Road, which is also Broadway Avenue in New York City. Right at that intersection, during the Revolutionary War, George Washington established his principal supply operation, that supported the men fighting in the field up and down the Northeast and East Coast. And it's a unique site in that, like, take for instance the Monmouth battlefield in New Jersey. That commemorates a battle that took place over 2 days. Um, but the supply depot site was in action for about 7.5 years, and so it left a pretty deep imprint on the community. And because of disease and war wounded and a whole bunch of other things, it had a tremendous amount of death in Fishkill. People talk about Valley Forge and Morristown as sites that were really hard during the winters of 78 and 79. But imagine being like 75 miles more north than Morristown. Um, and so here's this site that's right along a very popular road, Route 9 in the modern day. And there's an 11-acre parcel in particular that's been the subject of a commercial development plan now for about 11 years. And our group has been battling the developer to prevent the site from being developed. Because if it's developed, we will lose arguably one of the most unique sites in terms of Revolutionary War sites, because the supply and logistics mission, um, as well as foundations from Washington's horse stables and this burial ground that now has 14 known burials in it, probably hundreds more, honestly, by the records. But that's what we're trying to do: save this site from commercial development.
and what does success look like? What's the ultimate end goal? Is to get like deed restriction on the property and
Yeah, if
ownership?
we had a match, yeah, we really want to be, our group wants to acquire and be the stewards of the site. And then, similar to what's taking place, let's say at Jamestown, Virginia, where there's this long-term rediscovery project with ongoing archaeology, where they're, you know, recreating the Jamestown colony. That's the sort of long-term archaeological study that we'd like to see done here at this site in Fishkill, because it's rich with artifacts and foundations and ruins and burials. Um, so acquire the site, study the site, and then bring it to the public. That phase is called interpretation. We want people to come and visit the site and learn about the history and understand the role that Fishkill played in the revolution. It was intrinsically linked to West Point. I told Vince that every day, we know from historical records, there was a courier that would carry daily logs and muster rolls between West Point and Fishkill, on horseback and by boat, because they're only 11 miles apart as the crow flies, and they were linked. West Point defended the army, and Fishkill supplied it.
So does this sit like who is the government? What type of government is it? Is it a borough or a township?
Town of Fishkill. Yeah.
Town of Fishkill. So they've got like a town council basically. Like, who are your advocates and who are your enemies in this whole? Obviously, the developer is an enemy, but are there
So at
other
the
decision maker influencers that you can
right,
kind of lean on? How does that work?
all
The dynamics
all
of that.
politics are local, right? That really
Hmm.
holds true here. At the time that the developer submitted his development proposal in 2015, the town supervisor and the town planning board were fairly pro-development. They liked that revenue and the tax dollars and the ratables and stuff that come into the town. So very quickly, the developer got nearly all of his plan approved. Okay. Then, as a result of that, people in the town, the residents, were unhappy and they wanted a change in government. So they elected a new supervisor who is more or less in our corner and is trying to systematically undo many of the approvals that were done by the prior administration. But that's tough to do because it takes change of personnel, it takes a lot of effort. Um,
But the townspeople are probably opposed for other reasons, right? Traffic and maybe are like, are there any are there any folks that are real champions because of the historic context, or is it mostly just because of the inconvenience factor for them as
yeah,
residents?
so it's a mixed bag. The older established residents of the town, the ones that have been there for generations, they want the history to stay because
Hmm.
most of it's been lost to development. There were other portions of Fishkill that were very historic that have been lost. Then there's this other component who live right around that site, and for traffic reasons and congestion and all other things, they don't want any development. There's a part of the town that wants the green space to stay because
Hmm.
so much is turned into strip malls and whatever. It's a mixed bag, and we don't really care who gets on board or for what reason. We just we don't think with all the other possibilities that there are for development for this owner who owns the land um, that he doesn't really need to develop this parcel.
Hmm. So this is your main focus these days is really just your passion around preserving this little section of the history of America.
It is. I do the American Legion thing, and I'm a local commander, but the American Legion programs are pretty top down. They're kind of easy to
Yes.
deliver to
So
the
hold on.
community.
Let's double click on that. You're the commander for the American Legion locally there, right?
Yeah. So if you're familiar with the Legion, most towns across the U.S. have a post. I'm sure
Right.
Metuchen does, right?
We do.
Metuchen.
We do.
Yeah. Yeah. So for our town, Hopewell Junction is the nearest post. I'm the commander. And so
So what does that mean?
organize.
You have to like hold court like once a month with this crew and you do some sort of like
Yeah.
event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're primarily Vietnam era vets, but we're trying to bring in Gulf War guys and war on terror guys and girls. Um, and our community is really pro-military. So we have a Memorial Day parade. We have a parade in the fall. We do a
Hmm.
lot with the high school. All the programs that the American Legion is known for, like Boy State and
Hmm.
the oratorical competitions and things like that. Yeah, we do all of it. And as
Yeah.
the commander, I'm kind of organizing that effort
That's
to the
awesome.
guys who are partnered with me.
I aspire to follow in your footsteps and try to be more involved with my local. I'm a member. I'm a lifetime member of my local American Legion, but I can only do so many things, and you get involved. There's a lot of like just I don't know. It's like small ball kind of stuff that's going on there. It's just a little bit irritating.
I
But
hear you.
what I do have a big regret though, which is the fact that I wasn't paying attention recently. This happened like 2 or 3 years ago. Um, they identified through DNA um, uh, technology. They exhumed the remains of a Metuchen World War II soldier. They were able to identify his remains in France, and they repatriated his remains
Hmm.
for Memorial Day. And I was the speaker. They asked me. I was the speaker, and I did this whole thing. But Do you know that it turned out he was in the 1st Cavalry Division? And at that time, our classmate, John Richardson, was the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. If I had only had the time to put 2 and 2 together, I would have been able to get him out here for that event.
Yeah.
I mean, it was big. I mean, there was like, I think we had 1,000 motorcycles, bringing the remains from
The airport.
Newark Airport
Yeah.
to the hometown ceremony, hometown cemetery, the whole thing. But and this family lost 3 sons in World
Oh
War
my.
II. Yeah.
Yeah, like a Saving Private Ryan kind of thing.
I know. And my dumbass, I just didn't have I wasn't plugged in enough along the way to be able to make that happen. I mean, I was part of it, but anyway,
Now, it
we can
sounds
only
like it went off pretty well, though.
it went off all right. But as it was happening, I'm like, oh my God, first Cav. And so anyway, could have
Mm.
done more, um, but Lance, what you have done, what you continue to do is incredible, right? You are a tremendous citizen, soldier, former soldier, FBI agent. How blessed we are to have you as a classmate, a friend, a fellow member of the class of '91. This is your time. Like, I want to, at the end of our podcast, I kind of pass it off to you for some words of wisdom, some thoughts to leave with our class about life, liberty, pursuit of happiness in general. Like, what would you want to leave with our classes as your message?
Well, I should thank Vince for the idea to pursue the Old Grad podcast. I hadn't really even considered it, but he's brought the idea to me, and I'm grateful that he did, and grateful for the time that you carved out to get this done. You know, the reason I'm so heavily involved in service stuff is because I've really never been interested in money, so it was kind of an easy pivot to put all my energies to. I never chased the dollar, so that might be one explanation. But I will say this is that when I got to Fort Hood, um, I was in a battalion, 182. Troy Filburn was probably my closest friend there and classmate. But we had Dan Keeter and Ron Hall were also in the battalion. The great group of guys, and Troy Prestonberg was in the battalion next door, so it was a lot of fun. But I get to the artillery battalion. I get assigned to fire support. I go down to the fire support office to talk to First Lieutenant Kevin Wilson, who's my first senior fire support officer. And I introduce myself and tell him I'm newly assigned and all that stuff. And he's like, okay. He goes, I want you to call Lieutenant Sublet. It's his day off, but he's a good fire support officer, and he'll get you squared away in terms of starting to learn the ropes, right? And so I said, well, I don't want to call this guy on his day off, right? I don't want to be bothering him. And Lieutenant Kevin Wilson said to me, he said, listen, he goes, I'm going to teach you one lesson in life. He said, everyone wants to be thought of. He goes, so give Charles a call and tell him that I was thinking of him to help you find the ropes, learn the ropes or whatever. And that really stuck with me. And I've tried to apply that in my life to my friends and family and whatever. That's why I'm passionate about staying in contact with the Spartans and any other classmate that I know. And I'm starting to reacquaint myself with my high school classmates because, I was kind of not undercover, but I was certainly being discreet during my career in terms of people that I contacted. And so that's kind of my life lesson is, everybody likes to be thought of or wants to be thought of. And I try to tell my daughters that, treating people fairly and asking them for help it's a good thing because I think generally people want to give help. So
That's a great message. Everyone wants to be thought of. Thank you. Thank you for the time tonight. Thank you for everybody that joined it. The chat's been lighting up here with a lot of people still watching and a lot of good comments from company classmates, company mates, and also high school classmates. So thank you,
Thank
everybody who
you.
listened, and this will be live on Spotify very soon. I will crank it down, and I saw that Scott Clemenson's also on here. I have one in the can, which was me talking to him several months ago, and I need to get
I
that one out.
shanghaied them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'll get them done. But thank you, everybody, for joining us for the Old Grad Podcast. I'm going to stop the live feed now, but Vince and Lance, you can stick around. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Go
Yes, thank
Army,
you.
beat Navy.